I don't know. Tim Walsh is out there talking again.
Did he say he could fight any Trump supporter?
Yeah, he says he kicked their they're scared of him because he could fix a truck. Because they're threatened by his masculinity. I know how to fix a truck. So he said, like, do you? I bet you don't.
The lady doth protest too much.
I bet you don't. I bet if I bring a broken truck to you and a bag of tools, you're
You were saying that men he worked with in the National Guard in Nebraska went to the FBI because they believed he had given classified military secrets to the Chinese government?
They suspect that he did.
Suspected to the point that they went to the FBI.
And then China started producing almost a carbon copy of this military tank a couple years later.
Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson just gave Minnesota Governor Tim Walz a one-way ticket to political embarrassment, and it was brutal. At 0:50, Rogan launched in with raw disbelief and sharp-edged humor, while Tucker carved into Walz's policies, like a steakhouse chef with a score to settle. From pandemic missteps to skyrocketing crime, they exposed Walz as the face of failed leadership, a walking PR campaign wrapped in polite incompetence. If ineffective governance needed a mascot, this takedown gave it a name and a spotlight.
There's video of Tim Walsh doing the exact same thing.
Right.
Exact same thing. And he said, of course, it's a Nazi salute. He said that.
Right.
We spent 3 days debating, having them trying to debate that President Musk gave a Nazi salute. Of course he did. But that is a distraction.
This is how crazy things have gotten. Like,
it's coordinated propaganda.
So, who is Tim Walz exactly? Most of us, I just want to say, I think he's like, should be investigated by the sex crimes unit. I really feel that way. I'm not asking you to comment on that, but he's one of the creepiest people I've ever seen.
Joe Rogan leaned back, arms crossed.
I would not let him in my house.
That trademark skeptical glare spreading across his face like someone just claimed tofu could outsteak a ribeye. The topic? Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. Rogan didn't bother with niceties. He dove in. Headfirst, a human torpedo of logic, sarcasm, and barely concealed disbelief. This wasn't a friendly poke. It was a full-throttle, 190-proof takedown of government dysfunction, and Walz was the unlucky pinata swinging in the spotlight.
You know how gangster that is? You know, you shoot a guy in the face and the dude's like, yeah, I look like a bird. Don't worry about it.
I look like a dude. Is there any way to you that we're not being gaslit by Kamala Harris?
First target, Walz's pandemic performance.
Like, wasn't
Rogan
she like
chuckled and shook his head like he was replaying the plot of a bad sci-fi movie. He said Governor Walz had treated Minnesota like a petri dish, but instead of finding solutions, he cooked up the most confusing, restrictive, and downright absurd rules imaginable. Small businesses shuttered, schools locked up, but big box chains thrived. Rogan skewered the logic. Gyms were closed, but liquor stores stayed open. What? He joked. Did Walz think vodka killed COVID better than sunlight and squats?
His wedding anniversary, they were married 5 years after Tiananmen Square, and he picked that date because it was a date that they would remember, he and his wife.
What?
Who does that?
Tiananmen Square?
Correct.
The tank crushing the lone protester? That's
their wedding anniversary. And they went to China for their honeymoon.
Come on. You're sure he picked the anniversary?
They've talked about this in
Tiananmen Square
interviews. Yeah, this is in newspapers.
Tiananmen Square was a massacre of peaceful protesters.
I know.
Do you think they picked it to, like, in the memory of those brave souls who died opposing the machine?
They haven't said that.
Oh my God!
Doesn't bother me that much. If the people in Minnesota like it, like, who cares? It's just a star and some colors. The real problem is when you hear discussions of things that are like openly Marxist philosophies, when you hear talk about equal outcomes and, you know, and not just equal opportunity, but that we all need to arrive at the same place, equal outcome talk. There's only one way they can do that, and it's by forcing you.
Well, it's by everyone having nothing.
Yeah.
That's the only way to have.
Then came the mask
totally
mandates.
Because you can't have everyone.
Rogan rolled his eyes so hard it looked like he was trying to forget the taste of middle school cafeteria meatloaf. He painted Walls as a guy flipping through a pandemic playbook ghostwritten by Twitter activists and pale bureaucrats who hadn't seen sunlight since Y2K. This wasn't science-driven leadership. Rogan argued it was pure panic theater, with Walls starring as the lead actor and every Minnesotan stuck playing the bewildered understudy.
I don't talk about my faith a lot, but Matthew 25:40 talks about, to the least amongst us you do unto me. I think that's true of most Americans. They simply want order to it.
First of all, kudos to CBS for allowing Governor Walz to quote Matthew 25:40 without interrupting him and saying, I'm sorry, that's an attempt at bringing in foreign disinformation campaign.
Then came the riots. Rogan wasn't even mad. He was baffled.
Burn on your
the way
tongue.
Walz handled the George Floyd protests, and more critically, the violent chaos that followed, left Rogan speechless for about half a second. Then he unloaded like a man who just watched a firefighter toss gasoline on a burning house. He described Minneapolis as looking like the set of a post-apocalyptic movie, while Walz's grand strategy seemed to be, look stunned and do nothing. Entire city blocks burned, and the governor's response, a blank stare and radio silence.
If someone's going to inherit your soul, they don't want it bogged down with bad habits.
Right. Yeah, well, they don't want it to be evil. They want it to have negative energy attached to it and the karma of killing a bunch of people.
Right.
Like, who wants Dick Cheney's soul? You know? The alien's like, you have that dude.
Remember when he shot someone and then the guy apologized to him? Isn't that nuts?
You know how gangster that is? Yeah. You shoot a guy in the face and the dude's like, yeah, I look like a bird. Don't worry about it.
I look like a dude. Is there any way to you that we're not being
Rogan
gaslit,
didn't hold back.
like, to hell by
He joked that it
Kamala
felt
Harris?
like Walz was trying to set a world
In what
record
way?
for the slowest response to civil unrest, like he was waiting for the fire to send a calendar invite. According to Rogan, Walz didn't govern. He held press conferences and hoped the smoke would clear itself. It wasn't leadership. It was a substitute teacher trying to control chaos with a pamphlet and a prayer. Then Rogan pivoted to education. And that's when the flamethrower came out. He scorched Walz's cozy relationship with the teachers' unions, calling it less of a partnership and more like a hostage situation. School stayed shut so long, Rogan joked, kids forgot what a pencil was, while union leaders were treated like oracle priests issuing decrees in stone. Public education in Minnesota? A political vending machine, Rogan said, where every policy came with a shiny slogan. And zero results. Next stop, crime. Rogan went in on the violent crime wave, carjackings, and the collapse of police morale. He said under Walz, Minneapolis started to feel like the kind of place where Uber drivers needed hazard pay, and cops were treated more like suspects than public servants. He pictured Walz sipping coffee from a mug that said, "Please don't blame me," while neighborhoods spiraled and residents locked their doors before noon.
I think it's fake. All of it.
Well, that Walz guy, I mean, I don't want to be too unfair because I don't know him and I don't have any hard evidence. He's a weirdo. That guy's weird.
He seems very
I'm
strange,
sorry.
yes.
There's something not right about that guy's personal life. So I hope I'm wrong because I don't want people like that with power. But
like a stand-up comic with a mean streak, Rogan then tore into Walz's public image. He said the guy looked like he was always one confused sentence away from apologizing for something he didn't even understand. His voice, his posture. It wasn't leadership. It was the political equivalent of a shrug in a suit. Rogan joked Walz resembled a middle manager nervously giving a disaster preparedness presentation. While the building was already on fire, then came Tucker Carlson. If Rogan brought the sarcasm, Tucker brought the scalpel. He didn't shout, he didn't even blink. He dismantled Tim Walz with that signature icy smirk, the kind that says, "You don't know it yet, but I'm about to erase your whole brand." Tucker started with one word, weak. He called Walz the poster child for what happens when ideology replaces reality. According to Tucker, Walz wasn't governing. He was managing emotions, terrified of confrontation and addicted to applause. Lines. He painted him as a man who mistook hesitation for empathy. who believed that waiting long enough to act somehow made him virtuous.
Tasked with choosing the new flag and seal made its final selections this week, and the new design will debut next year. It follows 4 months of meetings, many spirited debates, and 2,500 submissions from the public sharing their ideas for the new symbols.
This is why they changed it. He said it was problematic.
Problematic. Oh, I love that term. Our current flag is problematic. I think we all know that.
Tucker then zeroed in on Walls' reaction to the George Floyd incident,
I think it's
not to question his sympathy, but to expose the leadership vacuum that followed.
He didn't fault Walls for caring.
He hammered him for vanishing when leadership was needed most. While citizens were terrified, while businesses burned, while people begged for direction, Walls disappeared behind a wall of platitudes and rehearsed sorrow. Tucker compared it to watching a ship captain offer therapy sessions. While the vessel barreled toward an iceberg, then he turned to law and order, the centerpiece of his takedown. Minnesota, Tucker argued, had become a test lab for soft on-crime policies, and Walls was the chief technician. He portrayed the governor as a man who let ideological activists dictate public safety while regular Minnesotans paid the price. Crime wasn't just a chart, Tucker said. It was shattered lives, ruined neighborhoods, and families left unprotected because their leaders were too timid to call evil by its name. He ran through example after example of failed reforms, mocking the idea that police had become a necessary evil instead of protectors. And he eviscerated Walls for surrendering to the loudest, most radical voices in his party. Tucker called it moral abdication with a press badge. Walls didn't protect people, he protected his image. And Tucker didn't stop there. He lit into Minnesota's economy under Walls, describing the state's tax policies as a how-to manual for driving out your own population. He painted a picture of the middle class packing up U-Hauls, fleeing to lower tax states in search of basic economic sanity. While Walls hosted rallies about economic justice, Tucker said it looked more like he was auditioning for a documentary titled How to Fail Upward. The business exodus, the red tape, the decaying infrastructure, all of it, Tucker argued, was sold as progress under Walls' supposedly forward-thinking vision.
But also, interestingly enough, he has a confession letter. This is what I would call it. It's a letter made out to the FBI to Cash
Then
Patel
came the culture war.
that says that
Tucker lit
Governor
up with
Tim
disbelief
Walz
at what
made
he
him
called
do
Walls'
this.
endless parade of progressive stunts. He mocked the governor for turning Minnesota into a testing ground for every new woke experiment, where schools became laboratories of confusion and government offices morphed into activist hubs. According to Tucker, Walz wasn't trying to govern a diverse state. He was performing for an elite online audience that mistook chaos for courage. He circled back to the pandemic response, not just to call it draconian, but deeply hypocritical. Tucker pointed out how the rules bent and shifted depending on the political wind. Peaceful protest? Essential. Church service? Dangerous family-owned business? Shut it down. Hollywood-backed rally? Roll out the red carpet dot, and Tucker didn't just criticize. He tore apart the mindset behind it. He even mocked Walz' delivery, describing him as a man who sounded like he was reading bedtime stories to a nervous public. It wasn't reassurance, Tucker said. It was infantilization. Minnesotans weren't looking for a life coach. They needed a leader who would walk through fire, not hold a feelings circle, next to it dot, and then came the knockout. Tucker said Tim Walz was a man built for failure in a time that demanded strength. A politician who had mastered the art of sounding thoughtful while doing absolutely nothing. Someone more comfortable consulting with consultants than confronting reality. Minnesota didn't need a therapist, Tucker concluded. It needed a fighter.
When he was running for Congress.
There's more than one thing, too, right? He said he was a head coach.
Yeah, he was a head coach.
He was not a head coach. He was an assistant coach, which is an honorable thing. There's nothing wrong with being an assistant coach.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he also inflated his actual rank, right? He was slated to achieve a certain rank.
Right.
And
By the time
how did
Rogan
it
and
go?
Carlson were done, Tim Walz wasn't
admit
just
to the
roasted.
fact that he
He
wasn't
was
gonna retire
incinerated.
in order to achieve
One
his
hit him with unfiltered mockery, the other with surgical precision. Different styles, same conclusion. Tim Walz wasn't leading a state. He was managing its decline, and the most disturbing part. He didn't even seem to realize it. Rogan jumped back in with a look of stunned disbelief, like a man watching a magician saw someone in half, only to realize the trick actually worked. He doubled down on Walz's uncanny ability to dodge accountability like it was a professional sport. Rogan quipped that Walz could watch a city crumble in real time and still blame it on weather patterns, poor communication, or some vague cultural failure that mysteriously never pointed back to him. He compared Walz's leadership style to a malfunctioning GPS constantly recalculating while you're sinking in quicksand. One moment, he's saying public safety is a priority. The next, another police department collapses while he's busy hosting a diversity seminar in the rubble. Rogan painted a picture of Walz, surrounded by advisors who looked like they'd never touched grass, let alone grasped the real world. Consequences of their own policies. Then came the kill shot, Walz's press conferences. Rogan laughed, pointing out how Walz always looked like he was about to apologize for something. Anything, but somehow never did. He called it a masterclass.
But I think that. But I can't get past the core fact about Walz, which is he presided over, allowed the biggest city in the state to get burned down.
And seemed to not only allow it, but kind of support it, you know?
Well, yeah, did you see the video of his wife saying, I kept the windows open so I could smell the burning rubber from the riots?
Not see that.
The wife whose hand he shook.